Skirptards, beware. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Stop it! And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, and monsters and serpents, and Skirptards, to episode 55 of Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of Stand Back! I'm going to try science. Nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And tonight we are joined, as always, from his secret bunker deep beneath his secret space station and in its secret superposition in outer space. Or wait, is that his secret superposition? Because he often seems to be in more than one place at the same time. Mr. Brett England, how are you doing down, whatever. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. Hey, if I'm like way down super beneath my secret space station, does that mean I'm on the surface of planet Earth?
No one knows where you are, Watcher.
All right. Well, that's good. Okay, then it was supposed to be confusing because I don't know where I am.
Exactly. I was like making sure that I wasn't doxing you. We don't know if you're out there, up there, or down there. Whatever. You're just, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I actually had a thought during the intro that it would be cool if we could go back to episode 1, which we can't, so episode 2, and like see the evolution of the intro, because it's like we just keep stacking new cool stuff on top of it.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool. We maybe
Screw
when we,
you, man. What about the second one?
maybe on episode 72 we can do a flashback.
Right on. Like a little montage.
Episode 72, we can do a flashback of episode 2. But listen, I want to talk at some point. I want to talk to you about that math that you did recently. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be awesome. So maybe we'll bring that up in the third segment, possibly,
Or the fifth.
Right on.
or possibly the 5th segment. Yeah.
That's usually where I end up.
All right. So, Kyle, do you have any news for us? I have a little bit of news. I don't need to read anything. We seem to have been, we've been attacked all over the world by strange NATOs, like tornadoes of different types. Yeah. Like there was a hay NATO that attacked like a bunch of girls in a car, and they squealed when the hay NATO hit their car. It's pretty funny. And everybody has thought that the shark NATO is the most terrifying thing that Mother Nature has ever thrown at the human race. But the 8th fissure in the volcano in Hawaii recently made a lava NATO due to the updrafts. And I watched the video of that, and that is now definitely more terrifying than a shark NATO. So.
Oh, shit. Lava NATO. Sounds
Not
terrifying.
impressed. Not impressed.
Did it go all did it like start traveling around and destroying trailer parks?
No.
Oh, well then.
But it was
That's terrifying.
a tornado made out of lava. I think the news article that I looked at called it a volcano NATO, but I like lava NATO better.
Yeah, lava NATO.
Yeah, or magma NATO. The Watcher brings up the video right there. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic, right? See, he's impressed.
I never saw it. I mean, it seems scary.
Yeah. So, do you have any news?
Not really.
Okay.
Some guys dug up a bunch of skulls
Full of mush?
in the Aztec skull tower revealed.
Oh.
You didn't see that one?
No, I didn't see that. Aztec Skull Tower.
Yeah. They found a bunch of skulls, called it and then this trophy rack. See? Trophy rack of skulls.
Wow.
I don't know. That's about
Those
it.
are Aztec skulls, though?
Yeah, it says they were Aztec ruins, whatever they were digging through.
Thousands of human sacrifices had their still-beating hearts cut out before their heads were severed and added to a monument the size of a basketball court.
Holy crap.
Skulls.
And they had this huge rack that they would like run these wooden rods through, and they would drill holes in the sides of the skulls.
Yeah.
And run these wooden rods through to mount them all up there. So it looks like,
It kind of looks like what are those places called where they store skeletons? I can't remember what they're called right now. They have them in Europe. Where there are so many. They've been it's usually
cemeteries.
No. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's usually associated with it's not catacombs either. It's associated with like a church, usually some kind of where the church has had so many people buried inside of it, like wealthy people or royals, where their bodies are actually interred within the building, right? That they end up having too many, and they there's one church, there's one where everything is built out of, like they've got a chandelier out of people's skeletons, and
wow,
I can't remember what they're called right now. Yeah.
Yeah, this is they got a
ossuary.
They made a
I think
tower
it's called an
out of these skulls. Like they embedded the skulls into this mortar.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That was the only thing I saw. Here's another image of.
Oh yeah.
Excavating it. Somebody got artsy with the.
Yeah, it's an ossuary. So there's an ossuary somewhere in Europe where everything has been constructed out of bones of people that are long dead.
Wow.
The monks that keep the place we're running out of room to do anything, so they built everything out of the bones, like walls, tables, chairs, chandeliers.
That would be awesome.
It looks pretty weird. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But they're doing it out of respect for the dead, right?
Yes, I mean the dead are long dead, and the respect has long been paid them, and they are constructing this gorgeous, like a mausoleum, but everything is beautiful and candles and everything. It looks badass, but it's kind of creepy.
And maybe that's what the Aztecs were doing. You don't really know. I guess the idea is that it was horrific murder on a massive scale, and they decided somebody got artsy-fartsy with it.
Stand down or die.
All of these people were killed on top of pyramids. Let's build a giant thing out of them.
Right.
Okay.
Everyone said it was daft to build a tower out of skulls. Well, I built it all the same.
Okay, so I kind of want. Oh, it's in Prague. Okay, the Sedlec Ossuary in Prague, and maybe we'll have pictures of it in the show notes. I kind of want to. So a lot of the stuff you were talking about last show, with the magnetic field.
Yeah.
Okay. And the possibility of what it might do to latent abilities in the human race.
Yeah.
See the bone thing?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool looking. So again, we have this ongoing discussion with Brenner, who was on the show on 52. 52, I think so. Yeah, and he brought up this experiment that Dean Radin has done, Dr. Dean Radin, who does all kinds of excellent experiments in telepathy, just parapsychology in general.
I cannot do
And
that.
Dean Radin found that people's ability to do various parapsychological things were heightened when there wasn't magnetic field, when the magnetic field is dampened or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now I would like to know, and I wasn't able to figure this out, I would like to know if he was doing it during the day or during the night, because I wonder if the problem was the magnetic field during the day is being, because remember you were talking about how during a heightened solar state and a heightened magnetic, Terran magnetic field state, that during the night when the field is cleaner, the things might glow better, or the crystal. So I was wondering if
because I was looking at it in terms of resonance, like if you have like we were talking about the Schumann resonance.
Yeah.
So the magnetic field itself is resonating.
right.
So during the day, it's going to be disturbed by everything going on, coming from the sun or whatever.
Yeah.
So you might get a more, noisy
Yes.
vibration.
Right. And then
Whereas
during the night, it's
it's a cleaner,
Yeah.
more steady resonant state.
so.
That's why the nighttime is the right time.
To build pyramids. The nighttime is the right time. That's right. So what I was thinking was all those legends that say things like Man-made all was built in a single night by two brothers. Cain, in a fit of rage, built Baalbek in a single night.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that experiment made me realize, like, okay, that still fits the legends. Like, he was probably doing the experiments during the day. I doubt he was doing them in the middle of the night.
Yeah, okay, so did he experiment with heightened, like, magnetic fields at different resonant frequencies?
No, I think he just, like, tried it in a Faraday cage or something.
That's what I'm saying. So the fact that you get results from dampening it doesn't mean you wouldn't get even better results from increasing it and changing the frequency.
Right. And what I was thinking is like dampening it when it's daytime may actually help.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if he was doing it at night, dampening it may not help.
Right.
In other words, the noise of daytime like may affect people's ability to do stuff. This is why why is it there's this general idea that paranormal shit happens at night?
Yeah,
because the magnetic field is just cleaner. Like, that's when we can see ghosts. And what are we seeing? It's with our minds mostly, right? This is why some people don't see. Remember the story I told about with Soraya, the guy from Where Did the Road Go podcast?
Yeah.
The story with the tree and one of his friends totally didn't see it. Okay. Yeah. Like, we see these things. Paranormal activity, if you're seeing ghosts, if you're seeing if something else is happening or whatever, it's like a UFO even, unless it's like what I would consider incredibly rare actual nuts and bolts shit. You know, you see these glowing lights that move all crazy. I think a lot of it you're seeing with your mind, because it's like, and this is the other thing, cameras have a really hard time picking this shit up, because it's like you were saying on one of the episodes that like they're not. You know, we're not seeing them exactly like totally with our eyes, and this camera thing is designed to see what we see with our eyes.
Right.
So it gets these fuzzy, because there's something there, right? But it doesn't have the ability to see what we're, like all the context that our mind is putting into it.
Yeah.
And those things happen just generally at nighttime.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wonder if like things like, you know, that everybody can do, like knowing you're being stared at, or I mean, because I know, like, I used to go to Starbucks at night all the time, and I knew I was getting stared at.
I cannot do that.
But I just thought that was fascinating that it fit the legends, because the legends always say dwarves built it in the middle of the night, or you know, the elves, the good folk, you know, the what do they call them? The
Fae folk.
The Fae, yeah, built it in a single night, or Cain built Baalbek in a single night, or Man-Made-All was built in a single night, or all of the frickin' Moai walked to their places in a single night.
Yeah.
You know, it's always at the night time.
Yeah, that's cool. Also, I would say that, you know, in terms of resonant frequencies of the brain, like everybody, you know, you can say, well, the alpha frequency is roughly around 12 hertz or something. But it's going to be different for everybody. You know, that's sort of an average.
Yeah.
So you were just pointing out that some people can see certain things and other people can't, or some people can, you know, detect this or that. It's just like, you know, I have to sub-vocalize when I read and you don't.
Right.
You know, like you can convert the symbols directly to concepts, whereas I have to convert them to a form of audio.
Yeah.
Like in my mind. So like I bet you when I'm reading something, the resonant field around my brain looks different than yours, because you're doing different activities.
Yeah.
So if we were to say that in order to see this thing, you need to be at a resonant frequency of X, but you and I, when we do similar things with our mind, my frequency is a little bit different than yours.
Yeah.
So like if certain things that you do with your brain are being aided by the resonant field in the earth, then you might be able to detect when people are staring at you, whereas I might pick up something else.
Yeah.
I might be able to detect when someone's whispering about me.
You're like, somebody's talking about me.
That's what I'm saying. So like maybe the idea, like you're saying in Dean Radin's experiments, he was deadening some resonant frequency in electromagnetic field that certain abilities were heightened,
Yeah.
but perhaps others were dampened.
Yeah.
You know, but I haven't looked into those, so I should really speak about that. But
What do you think about the retrocausality stuff? Like, have we talked about this?
that's cool. I was gonna bring that up. That was a part of a section in Robert Schoch's book, Forgotten Civilization. He was talking about one of the retrocausality experiments was that these people took a test, and it was something about memorizing names of places or something like that.
Okay.
And then after they took the test, the computer generated a random practice session for only half of the test.
Okay.
And so then they practiced on half of the test, and then afterwards they saw the results of the test, and the part that they practiced half of that, those are the ones
The part that they practiced after they took the test, they were better at when they actually took the test.
That's right.
Retrocausality, folks.
That is a kick-ass experiment.
Yeah,
dude.
so the reason he did that is because it's been found over and over again that this works. Like, people who do remote viewing.
And who was, I don't remember who did those experiments, but was that Dean Radin?
Dean Radin has done a lot of that, yeah.
Okay, it might have been him.
People who do remote viewing have a much higher incidence a much higher percentage of correctness when they are shown the correct answer after they've done the viewing. Which doesn't help as
That
much.
sucks. If you're looking for buried treasure that no one knows where it is.
All right. That's what out of body is for. I've always talked about, like, I would love to learn to, like, because if you can induce sleep paralysis, because to me that's the gateway to out of body, because that's like you wake up and your whole body is buzzing, or you feel like this buzzing, but it's almost like an electrical shock. You translate it as a sound, but it's more like a zzz, like it's almost like you're being shocked, and that's something like your energy form, whatever you would call it, your soul, your spirit, your energy form is kind of out of sync with your physical body, and you can get out of it, right? So sleep paralysis is the first step, and if you can get out of it, and then you're not lucid dreaming. Now you're in the real world as a spirit form, and then that's when you go find buried treasure and shit.
Yeah.
Because you can go to Jupiter, or you can go down under the ground and look
See,
at caves,
that's interesting.
find pyramids.
The retrocausality experiment with remote viewing could suggest that they can't really remote view. They can only see the future a little bit.
Right. That's exactly what Dean Radin points out, is that and he also, I was listening to an interview with him and the guy from Rune Soup, the guy that does chaos magic.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how almost all magic can be explained with retrocausal, with retrocausality, that you're actually, what you're doing is precogniting your own future knowledge. and like, he was talking about that. He was like, yeah, that is an interesting thing. Like, like a lot of magicians don't like that. They want to be like, no, I'm doing magic spells, right? No, you might just be reading your own mind in the future. Which is still really cool. Why are you mad?
It's not as cool.
It's not as cool as just doing a spell. But like, there are other interesting things with the retrocausality, like the experiment where they were testing to see if people knew what picture their computer was going to bring up, and that was a purely physical one where you don't have control over it, right? And so they hook people up to all these physical monitors. It's sort of like a lie detector test, but they can just detect heightened, like all this, like it's on your skin, so they're detecting heightened heart rate, breathing. It has to do with conductivity or whatever, and like people would start to get excited. Like the computer would randomly choose from a huge folder of images, right? And like maybe 10% of those images, or maybe even smaller than that, I don't know. Some small percentage of the images were provocative in some way, like they were violent, bloody, or they were pornography, whatever. And this test showed consistently that people started to have an excited or like heightened response long before the computer even chose which image, because it would choose it right before showing it.
Yeah.
So before the computer even knew what it was going to do, they would start to show this heightened physical response like about 2 seconds before the image came up.
Yeah.
And not when it was
So
like
is that retrocausality, or is that them
Right.
interacting with the random device in the computer?
And that's the question. Dean Radin says that since retrocausality is seen everywhere in all these different things, that he thinks it's most
More
likely
likely
to
that.
be retrocausality. The other one that they did that was really interesting was where the computer would put up 4 images on the screen, and then you would choose one that you thought it was going to pick out of those 4 to show you next, right? And males, not females, males would start to get excited when they were right, before they knew they were right.
Yeah.
About same deal. About 2 seconds before they knew. With girls, it didn't. They didn't do that. They didn't start getting stoked.
But
Like,
that might be because they don't get excited when they win, as much as guys do.
right? Guys are like, yes, before they even know.
Football.
But what's interesting is, again, it was an unconscious physical thing they were measuring, not like a mental, like, yes, I won. Like, they started to get stoked physically, something you can't control, and it was correct. Like, when they were wrong, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? So they pick like picture 1 or whatever, and then when they were wrong, it was picture 3, they didn't get excited. But when they picked picture 3 and that was about to come up, they'd start getting excited before it came up. Like somehow, and that you could again explain that with retrocausality, that they were connecting with their future knowledge that they were right before they actually knew that they were right.
So what would be cool is
So guys are right so like little compared to women that they get really freaking excited before they actually are right.
Yeah, that's gotta be what it is. That's gotta be what it is.
Girls are just like, of course I'm
They
right.
already know they're right. Yeah. And even when they're wrong, they're right. So it's like they pick the wrong image and they're like, oh, I'll get
The
it next
computer
time.
was wrong. Yeah. The computer picks the wrong picture.
So what would be really cool is if the retrocausality is actually like that we have. It kind of ties into deja vu, right? Deja vu is very similar to
Yeah.
retrocausality. Like you're experiencing, like you know that this is happening, or that you've seen it before, but maybe it's because you're actually tapping in. You're just reading the future, like right before it happens.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if there is a correlation between like the electromagnetic field resonance and the ability to like see the future in terms of, I don't know, how do you say retrocausality in that context? Like the ability to have retrocausability.
I cannot do that.
Anyway,
It's
So you know what I'm
precognition
saying?
of future knowledge.
okay, precognition, yeah. So I was just imagining like a period
How do you
where
have future retrocausal backward wait?
yeah. So I'm thinking about this idea that we actually have the ability to be conscious of a length of the present, as opposed to just because like
Yes.
we imagine the present as like almost like a single thing happening
Right.
constantly, but
An eternal instant.
yes,
Yeah.
constantly but instant. So what if there was what
range.
if we could broaden the present into 5 minutes or a day?
Wow, that would be
So the whole day,
hard.
a whole 24-hour period is the present.
Yeah.
So
That's what your memory does eventually. Like you could, like you'll have a memory of, like, say you go to Six Flags, right? And you spend all day at Six Flags. And like when you're remembering it as you're driving home, you're remembering it almost exactly with the same timeline as you had. Like, wow, I stood in line forever for this ride, and then I was talking to this guy, and then I finally got on the ride. But then like months later, when you remember it, the whole thing is a part of your memory all at once. So, like your mind is constantly compressing the memory, and then eventually you can think of that day at Six Flags, and it's all there. Like,
right, yeah.
right? So as we go further into the future, the past present becomes compressed until you do kind of can experience it that way by remembering the whole day all at once. Like, man, we went swimming that day and it was badass. Instead of like remembering every individual thing, they all are just present in the memory.
Yeah. I was thinking like,
I know, but I was just saying, like, that kind of is like what you're talking about.
yeah. I was just thinking that what if this also has to do with the electromagnetic field resonance, like how, I don't know. I'd have to think about what would that enable us to do if the present was actually a range of time
Yeah.
where you could, I don't know.
Well, I think
I
that
wonder if that give you all kinds of abilities to not make mistakes, because you could literally like know ahead of time, like you would be able to. It's like our minds already do this when you're running or something and you're going through like running down a
you're
rocky
looking at all
hill.
the possibilities. Yeah, you're like, okay.
Yeah, and you're making all these choices like on the spot, and you're making the right choices because
Yeah.
you're not falling.
Right.
But if
Until you do.
if you did fall, then if you knew,
Then you're still making choices.
But
yeah.
if you knew that you fell
yeah.
right before you did, you wouldn't step on that rock.
Yeah.
So if you could have even 5 minutes of that, like if everybody could have a 5-minute present,
Yeah, then
there would
nobody-
be all kinds of things you would be able to not say,
Right.
not do, and change what you did based on what happens,
Yeah.
and get everything right. And like what?
Then how would you experience it? Yeah. What would that experience be like?
I know.
I played a game called Life is Strange, where that was basically what it was. The main character, the one that you're playing, had the ability to kind of rewind time, sort of like Braid.
Yeah.
There was you had a range of time, like, so you would walk up to somebody and you would say something that was totally the wrong thing you just say, and you would go and rewind everything,
Yeah.
and then you could try it again, right?
Yeah.
But that's not. I don't think that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about having a complete knowledge of a range of 5 minutes around where you are in the present.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like the retro causality. Like you get the answers right because you study later.
Yeah.
So if you could be aware while you're answering the questions of the studying, if you could be more aware of it, right, that you're going to study later.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking of your example of like running down the hill. And let's say that you're like, holy crap, I should be dying right now. Just remember when you get to the bottom of the hill that you need to like really study that hill, walk
Yeah,
like climb up and down it and check everything out, and and that way you will have retrocausally made sure that you didn't fall.
Yeah, Brett brought up base jumping. It's like when you go base jumping, and, in your little squirrel suit, you just got to know when you jump off that cliff that you're actually going to hike all the way
back
bottom
up,
and
right,
check
and
out
check everything out,
and all the trees and everything else.
and then you won't hit anything.
That's right.
Didn't they do this in
And then you can cheat it because after you get to the bottom, you can decide, since you have free will, that you don't want to do that.
Wait.
But if you have the ability to like, you're totally gonna do this, right? And you can just trick your mind, trick the spirit world into thinking that you really are.
Somehow I think that would be tempting fate. Like you're like, you know what? I don't want to.
But then maybe that's like what is it, like pathological liars, or whatever the term is for people that actually believe their own lies.
Oh yeah.
Right. So maybe they actually had a skill in the previous world. And those were the guys that survived it all, because they could totally lie to themselves.
Yeah,
They're going to do this retro content shit.
I'm gonna study all this so that I totally survive. And then they're like done. They're like, I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, I never said I was going to study that.
Yeah, I didn't say it. I never said that.
That's why they're still alive today.
That's why we have so many pathological liars. Well, okay, so they did this in Bill and Ted, right? Whenever they're trying to get away from somebody, they're like, trash can. Remember the trash can? And it would fall over the dude. Right? Yeah. But they had to go back and do it.
Right.
Right? Because they're using a time machine. So, like, if they didn't go back and do the trash can.
Oh, I'll put them in the bushes.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Did your dad lose the keys? Yeah. I put them. Oh, look. I put them right here. That's right. Here they are. Yeah. So, like, I think that you would, if you were like stumbling down the hill and completely not breaking anything or falling or whatever, and you're telling yourself, I've got to study this hill, and then you got down there and didn't do it, you would get yourself into some kind of paradox loop. Right? That's the idea of time travel. Like, the reason why they say time travel is impossible is because of the grandfather issue. Like, you could go back in time and kill or become your own grandfather, and then that puts you in a loop forever. It basically loops the time around, and that's why it seems to be impossible.
Yeah, I am actually not. I'm not really a big time travel proponent or believer. I don't really think that.
You don't think we can go back and see dinosaurs?
I think we are time traveling. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, we're going forward all the time.
No, I think that I look at time as more space. It's just another dimension.
Yeah, Heinlein talked about that too.
Like, I think
That you could take a right turn in the timeline and experience very strange things.
I think the key to time travel is spatial. So there's no way to know what our absolute position is in space, because we don't actually know which direction we're moving ultimately.
Yeah, and there's space moving with us too.
Yeah. So, but the idea is that if we could actually go back to the exact space we were in 5 minutes ago, what if that is where time was 5 minutes ago? Right?
Yeah.
Like, in other words, like, we are three-dimensional objects in the space of time, and it's all in motion, and so we don't even know where we were 5 minutes ago in space.
Yeah.
So, like, we can't even travel back in space, people. Just forget the fourth dimension that you cannot really measure. Look at you, man.
So we are going to take a quick break, and we will come back and in the future, 5 minutes ago.
Snake time. It's eating itself.
Ouroboros time.
Regulated by the sands of time. A relentless and unstoppable pursuit of pyramids. Pyramids! Two brothers! Snakes in a cube. Snake Bros! Concerned with all things the universe. Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. Here we go. Dolmens. Giant resonant magnets. Controlling our retro causal abilities. So, I was just thinking about how far can this retrocausality thing go? Because what if I just went and translated all of the ancient Sumerian texts just like right now?
Cannot do that.
Because I know that when I'm like 60 and retired, I'm really going to study the shit out of that stuff. So I might as well just translate it now.
I was thinking the same thing about we were looking at all the hieroglyphs and you were like, well, these are all numbers. I'm like, how do you fucking know that? Well, probably because when you're 60 and retired, you're going to translate them.
I had a dream that I just started reading them. Like, I was able to I just started seeing them and just totally understanding what they all meant.
No, see, now that might be past life memories.
I was a sphinx.
I was an Egyptian slave. So
I was a sphinx man. I turned myself into a falcon. I was a foul man. King.
We shall have... Shit, I can't do it. We shall have children. They will be foul kingmen.
Stand down or die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But seriously, like, if Brett, we were talking about it in the break, like these guys that do the base jumping, they all have GoPro cameras on their heads.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the first thing they do after they're done is go put that video up and watch it.
Yeah.
So
cannot
it's like
do
they're
that.
studying for the test after they took the test.
Right.
Because they're seeing all of the trees and everything in their path that they're dodging when they're doing the base jumping. So what if, they record that video and then they get in the helicopter and then they fly to the wherever, get off that, and they go put it in their computer and rip the video down and then open it up in the program and then watch it. And It
Right.
could be like 8 hours later, 12 hours later and shit.
Yeah, and they probably watch it over and over because they're like, man, this is so fucking cool. Check
Yeah,
this
yeah.
out, guy. Yeah.
So how far does it go is the point. Like,
I don't know.
can it be 60 years?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't think there's a limit on.
so if I successfully,
I mean, dude, if you're reading the future,
if I successfully translate the Sumerian texts tomorrow, planning to translate them when I'm 60, then I know I'm going to live till I'm 60. So then I can just do whatever I want between now and then. And I know I'm not going to glad. You know what I'm saying? There's all kinds of stuff you could do with this.
that's true.
I mean, like, if you take the test and then, well, you can't know the score of the test. See, that's the weird thing. Like, if you know the score of the test before you study for it afterwards, then it doesn't work.
yeah.
So the guys that do the base jumping, maybe it's not retrocausal because they know that they landed and they didn't die.
Yeah.
So they know that they passed the test. So studying for it afterwards doesn't matter.
But they do anyway.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that that one of the key things with the retro causality thing in that one particular test or experiment was that they couldn't know the answer to the test until after they'd studied for half of it. They couldn't know the results of the test until after they studied half of the test. Then they could see the results.
But I see what you mean, but I think that well, but what are the results? Like the results of a base jump is like not just did you live or did you die, but like the actual questions of the quote unquote test in base jumping is like all of the shit you have to dodge.
Right.
Right. So they know that their score is perfect because they didn't fail to dodge anything.
Right.
But I doubt they think of it like that because it's, you know what I mean? So maybe if you don't know it's a test, if you don't know that you're having to solve a bunch of questions and answers.
Yeah, so it's almost like your conscious mind really just gets in the way
Absolutely.
of your time travel abilities.
Right. That's right.
But maybe that, see, again, could be part of the resonant magnetic field. Like that it's affecting our conscious minds in a way that's why we're so divided. Like we have this subconscious and then the conscious. And there's a clear like demarcation between the two. Like you can't, unless you're practiced at hypnosis, you can't really cross over on purpose and do things
Unless you're terrified.
quote unquote consciously. Like when you hypnotise yourself, you're really doing things on purpose subconsciously.
Right. And the only time it works is if you're terrified, which is what happens to the base jumpers. Like, I always remember the interview with the guy's like, the first thing that happens to me, I jump off the cliff, and then in my mind it's like, oh, shit! And then he calms down. And, like, so it's like a life or death.
Yeah.
Like, suddenly he goes into
Like it
this
forces
zone.
you into the
Right.
future.
It's like this last attempt to not die.
So also people that experience those types of situations also have other effects like superhuman strength.
Yeah.
So that's why I was trying to think of what are the possibilities here, because like, can we build Baalbek in one night if we really have control over that situation? Because something happens when something in the present just so drastically shocks you out of your normal mundane conscious thought that you suddenly have all these abilities that you normally don't have.
Yeah.
So what if we had more control over that, would we be able to pick up massive blocks and shave them down real fast?
Yes. Okay. So what I'm thinking of now is liminality. Like, there's this thing that's been becoming more and more clear that paranormal things happen, whether it's strange abilities or poltergeists or ghosts or whatever. Happen UFO. They happen during periods of quote unquote liminality, when you're in between, like when you have been knocked out of your groove, right? You've had this groove of like, I get up, I go to work, I come home, I watch TV, I go to bed, I get up, I go to work, like over and over and over, and then like you move, right?
Yeah.
You move houses, and all of a sudden your whole schedule is screwed up, and you're in a liminal state. That's what that means. Like you're in this liminal state in between periods of like being in the groove, and that's when weird stuff happens. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of what you're asking, like can things knock you out of the groove or whatever, and like what is it that happens that makes these things happen? And like the superhuman strength happens during this like incredible fear, like the classic story of the mother or the father picking the car up off of their child. You know, it's like that's something that jolts you or jars you out of your comfort zone. It's a liminal state. You're suddenly like, holy crap, right? I've got to do something and I have to do it now and there's no other choice. Like,
Yeah, and it's also like, you know, the mind over matter thing. Like, I'm going to flip this car over.
right.
There's no question of whether it's possible
right.
or whether you're strong enough.
That car's a Suburban. I don't care.
That's right. You were just going to do it. And
That's
it happens.
right.
That's when you jump off a cliff, you're like, I'm going to dodge everything.
That's right. I have a squirrel suit. I'm going to dodge everything using this squirrel suit. It's like, does the suit really matter? Or is it just like you put that on and so you believe that you can dodge everything on the way down and so you do?
Yeah.
Like, so what if you have a squirrel suit? You should still die. And if you jumped off there without that squirrel suit, you would totally not think you were going to live and you would die.
Yeah, that's right.
But you jump off there with that squirrel suit and you're like, I can fly.
I am a squirrel.
That's right. I can fly. I'm going to dodge everything and live. If squirrels can do this, so can I.
That's right.
Okay, so Brett is asking, he says, if retrocausality exists, is there such a thing as future casting or anterocausality? Which would, what do you mean by that? You can come on and tell us what you mean by that.
Anterocausality. No, you can't. Stay away from your mic.
Oh man, and I like just unmuted it and was about to talk and then got the no.
Keep going.
Well, what I'm saying is like, so you know how if you read books, like, right, like on these people who are successful
books.
people,
Oh, yeah.
they talk about all the time, they say things like you have to visualize achieving your goal. You have to believe completely in the fact that there will be a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Like positive thinking, positive direction, all of those things lead to success or positive outcomes.
Yeah.
So is there also such a thing as, like, I went with anterocausality because it's the opposite of the Latin root retro. I don't know what you would call it.
Right.
But like in the present, your belief in the outcome somewhere off in the distance fills the gap. So instead of it
Yes.
backfilling, you're sort of forward filling.
Yes.
For no reason whatsoever. You have no reason to believe you're going to be successful, but you do, and so you are.
That's part of chaos magic. Like Rune Soup, he talks about this all the time. That
cannot
like
do that.
like the purpose of casting a sigil is to take your intention for the future and sort of concrete it into your mind as something that will occur, and then that somehow interacts with the way that the universe works and your mind and your intentions, whatever, and it makes that pathway far more likely than if you didn't do that.
But that, I mean, whatever anterocausality, whatever you want to call it, that's something that seems to be very common in religious texts. You know, believe,
Right.
you know, faith.
Can move a mountain. Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's like all those self-help books, like they always tell you, you know, first thing is like, well, you have to think positive. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can think positive.
Have you ever met a pessimist who like had all kinds of crazy good stuff happen to them all the time? Just had crazy good luck and they're just totally pessimist? No.
Yeah.
Like people who are optimistic are the ones that have, I mean, they'll have bad stuff happen to them, but people who maintain optimism are the ones that reach the top, are the ones that have good things happen to them, you know? Like I learned this the hard way by being a pessimist for a long time about stuff like that. I would always complain that Kyle like would just walk outside of a movie theater and find $20. I'm like, man, that never happens to me, and it didn't. And then I stopped thinking. I was like, well, you know what? It could happen to me, and then I found $20. Well, it's $5, but still, it's I'm working my way up.
You gotta start somewhere, man. Yeah, you've been finding more arrowheads than me lately, so screw off. Don't get me stuck in a funk.
Okay, that's actually a really good topic right now. I want to ask you about that enormous. What the hell is that thing for?
What enormous thing.
When you were and you ran over there and grabbed it. Like what? Okay, it's shaped like an arrowhead. It's got the tang, and it's got the long. You know, spearheads were like leaf shaped.
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
It's way too big for an arrow.
Yeah, it's not an arrowhead. Like most of the quote-unquote arrowheads that you find are not arrowheads. They're either spear point or an atlatl point
But
or
spear points are like
a knife.
like round, right? They don't have the twin things coming.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they have the things that come up. Like there's just all these different types of
I was just saying, like, it looks like a
bases.
ballista bolt to me.
There's all different types of bases. Like they make these little bucktooth bases, and then where the actual blade started, there'd be like two little sort of wings that come off. I don't know the proper names for all the different parts of the.
Okay, how old do you think it is? Because that thing is huge. Like, what were they hunting with that gigantic thing? Who was throwing it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would say, late archaic.
Late archaic.
But I don't really know. I'm not real good with that.
Because it's too big for.
But I actually have another one that's almost exactly like that one.
Okay.
That is actually on the porch over there. And when I found that one, I was like, dang it! Because it's just like the bottom 2 inches, but it's so huge.
Yeah.
And it was like, man. But it was probably a knife. Like there's been some whole knives found that are still attached to the bone handles.
And they have
they're
those,
like-
they have those things coming off the back.
Yeah. Yeah, they attach them into the bone, and then there's like the wing on the top and one on the bottom.
Down.
Okay.
Die.
Because I looked at that and I was like, that's too big for even an atlatl. That's.
Yeah. That's more like a knife. What people would call it, like a knife blade or
But
something.
it looks like an arrowhead.
Why? Because of the way the base is?
Yeah.
Well, the base is...
It looks like it's designed for flight, and like unlike a knife, right? It looks like it's designed for flight, like an arrow or a spearhead. But that is generally not how they built spearheads, and it is how they built arrowheads. But I'm like, well, who is shooting that freaking arrow? It's too big for an atlatl. I just thought, like, I thought to myself, I was like, that looks like a ballista bolt, like a large bolt that you would have in something where you pull back on it and let go. You know what I mean? Like, think a crossbow on the ground, one too big to pick up.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know why I wouldn't look at it and say it was designed for flight. Like but I don't...
Because it has those wings. Like, that's how,
Those two things that were sticking down are that's where it was attached as far as I know.
Okay.
And then it kind of goes out straight on the sides.
Oh, okay.
But there are some huge ones that have, like what you're talking about, the little wings that come off the side. They're like, they're massive. And mainly they're not really wings. It's almost like they just cut 2 grooves up into the bottom of the arrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Or of the point.
Like, so we make arrowheads like that now because that increases their ability to fly straight and true, right? Whereas a spear point, what you need to focus on, because a spear is.
I think it's more about like the damage it would do to the animal. So like there are practice points for arrows that don't have wing. It's just a little point. It's just a sharp point that screws onto the end of the arrow.
Right.
Because you don't want to put razor blades, that's big wide razor blades on an arrow, because they're just going to get crushed when they go into a bale of hay or a target. So you put just a sharp point.
Yeah.
It's simple. But like if you want to kill an animal, you want to have those wide blades.
Yeah, you're
that
saying
stick off.
they act like barbs, like they won't let it be retracted out or something.
Well, they
Or you
just
wanna make a big
they cut more.
Yeah.
Right, they're wider, they cut more.
Okay.
So, like a lot of the quote unquote bird points that are, that I think are actual arrowheads, they have these like wide wings that come out. I don't think they're for flight. I think they're for cutting. Because they're probably they're gonna break most likely when they. If you miss or even if you hit one, that's probably it for that bird point.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I saw that thing and I was like, it looks like it was designed for. Because a thrown spear does not have the initial velocity of an arrow. It just doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Even an atlatl is not going to have the initial acceleration and velocity of an arrow, and so they make the points differently. I thought that and of course you're gonna have fletching, which helps it fly straight.
Yeah.
Right. But you want that. You kind of want this like aerodynamic thing going on with the arrowhead too, along with your fletching. And I don't know if they probably didn't rifle their fletching to make it turn.
Well, almost every point that I have has a twist to it. Like even the big ones.
Oh, they did rifle it.
If you look down from the point, like down, like you point the the point of an arrow or an artifact like right at your eye, you can see that it actually twists a little
Okay, so
bit.
they did rifle it.
But I think that's actually that just happens when you're napping. Like the way that you do it, it ends up doing that, because like I've made them and they all have that same twist, and like depending on, I think if you're right or left-handed, they twist a different way.
Yeah. So you better get the right Fletcher then, because if he has his fletching turned the wrong way, they're going to be fighting each other. It's going to not work. But I'm just thinking, like,
I think the fletching.
I just wonder if they had, like, why wouldn't they? If you understand the physics of a bow, who would not think of making a very big bow that was turned sideways, that was mounted on something that you could like put your foot on the stump and then pull way back?
Yeah.
This giant, a ballista. That's what that's called, right?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
No, I mean I'm not saying they didn't do it. I honestly don't think that we know what, all the things that are quote unquote known about these artifacts. I don't think they're actually known. They're guesses.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, surely in caves and stuff, they've found whole things. Right?
Yeah.
They've found probably some of these points that are well-known points still on
Whatever they were on. Yeah.
That's. I'm sure that's happened. I mean, there's probably all kinds of museum pieces that are very well preserved, and I mean, I know there's been arrows, and whole like quivers full of arrows with the heads still on them. And,
Right.
So I know
have they
that there's-
found any with that big of a thing on there?
No, because they weren't shooting arrows. They weren't arrows, right? They were. And I think that
I don't understand why you would want a knife that had have those things coming off it, because you could stick yourself with that. Like it's like having a sword that has like spikes coming down back towards your hands.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If they mounted it to an antler or two, or just however they carved the handle. I don't know. Never found one, but I hope to. I'm gonna find one.
And Daryl calls out.
Right there. That's right. I'm finding one of those bitches.
So we can put a picture in the show notes of what you found.
I'll get the other one, because the one that I found recently, I left at that ranch.
Oh.
On the table.
That's right. And it's probably gonna be a while before we go back there.
I have so many broken pieces. I'm just bragging right now, but I'm not really bragging because they're all broken. But I have
that collection.
pots full of broken
Yeah.
artifacts, and so when I find a pretty badass broken artifact on somebody's ranch, I
Let's do that.
leave it there.
Yeah.
If it's whole, I take it. No, I'm joking. But seriously, if it's a really good one, I will ask if I can take it and put it on my table.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so the next topic, I want to go ahead and go through this King's List thing, because I've been thinking about this article.
oh yeah,
All right. So this is from Ancient Origins. It is ancient-origins.net. And the article is called "The Sumerian King List Still Puzzles Historians After More Than a Century of Research." So,
that's not much research.
yeah, most of that century they didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
Okay. Out of the many incredible artifacts that have been recovered from sites in Iraq where flourishing Sumerian cities once stood, few have been more intriguing than the Sumerian King List, an ancient manuscript originally recorded in the Sumerian language, listing kings of Sumer, which is ancient southern Iraq, from Sumerian and neighboring dynasties, their supposed reign lengths, and the locations of quote-unquote official kingship. What makes this artifact so unique is the fact that the list blends apparently mythical pre-dynastic rulers with historical rulers who are known to have existed. Right, we get the same deal here. Like,
Yeah.
well, those ones are mythical, but these, but the list has real people on it, and somehow when you go back in time, they turn mythical because they lived too long. The first fragment of this rare and unique text, a 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablet, was found in the early 1900s by German-American scholar Hermann Hilprecht at the site of ancient Nippur and published in 1906. Since his discovery, at least 18 other exemplars of the King's List have been found, most of them dating from the second half of the Isin dynasty, which is, they date at 2017 to 1794 BCE. So 2000 BC. No two of these documents are identical. However, there is enough common material in all versions of the list to make it clear that they are derived from a single ideal account of Sumerian history. And this is the one that they made in these like there were these like square columns, and they stood on a spindle so you could turn it and read all sides.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like the sunglasses deal at the gas station. I think I've said that once in one of the shows. Okay, among all the examples of the Sumerian king list, the Weld Blundell Prism in the Ashmolean Museum Cuneiform Collection in Oxford represents the most extensive version as well as the most complete copy of the king's list. The 8-inch high prism contains 4 sides with 2 columns on each side. It is believed that it originally had a wooden spindle going through its center so that it could be rotated and read on all 4 sides. It lists rulers from the antediluvian, or quote-unquote before the flood, dynasties, to the 14th ruler of the Icen dynasty, which would be circa 1763 to 1753 BC. The list is of immense value because it reflects very old traditions while at the same time providing an important chronological framework relating to the different periods of kingship in Sumeria, and even demonstrates remarkable parallels to accounts in Genesis. So, Sumer, sometimes called Sumeria, is the site of the earliest known civilization located in the southernmost part of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in the area that later became Babylonia and is now southern Iraq from around Baghdad to the Persian Gulf. By the 3rd millennium BC, Sumer was the site of at least 12 separate city-states, and here they list them: Kish, Erech, Sippar, Akshak, Larak, Nippur, Adab, Tibira, and Larsa.
Yes.
Each of these states comprised a walled city and its surrounding villages and land, and it each worshipped its own deity, or Anunnaki guy, Nepha, whose temple was the central and original structure of the city. So think about that.
The house of God.
Right, and kind of like what happened with Göbekli Tepe, like archaeologists used to say that the city was founded first and then the temple arrived. But Sumer shows you over and over and over again that the temple was there first.
Yeah.
Right. Political power originally belonged to the citizens, but as rivalry between the various city-states increased, each adopted the institution of kingship. The Sumerian kings list records that 8 kings reigned before a great flood. After the flood, various city-states and their dynasties of kings temporarily gained power over the others. Okay, so here we go. Sumer's mythical past. The Sumerian kings list begins with the very origin of kingship, which is seen as a divine institution. Quote, the kingship had descended from heaven, unquote. The rulers in the earliest dynasties are represented as reigning fantastically long periods.
They were robots. they were just like robots sent down here by the Anunnaki
to rule us.
Yeah.
And they had bird
A
heads.
kingship came down from heaven, and it was just put in this building.
Or the building that we see now as the temple is like a stone representation of the original ship.
Yeah.
After the kingship, okay, so this is a quote. From a Sumerian translation. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eredug. In Eredug, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alorjar ruled for 36,000 years. 2 kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. Unquote. Some of the rulers mentioned in the early list, such as Etana, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh, are
Wait. I'm sorry to interrupt you. What was the first length of time?
28800, 28,800. Yes, these
18.
are mostly processional, yeah.
And then the other one is 36, 9. And the other one,
when they add them
18.
together, 648. Yeah.
18.
Yeah. They're all processional numbers. Okay, so some of the rulers mentioned in the early list, such as Etana, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh, are mythical or legendary figures whose heroic feats are subjects of a series of Sumerian and Babylonian narrative compositions. The early list names 8 kings with a total of 241,209.
Wait.
241, 2.
Right.
9. Right? Just check my arithmetic there, buddy.
I'm just saying, people listening are going to hear you go 24,209.
Yeah. Okay. The early list names 8 kings with a total of 241,200 years. When you add up 2412 equal time.
Yeah, there you go.
From the time when the kingship, quote, descended from heaven, unquote, to the time when the flood swept over the land and once more, quote, the kingship was lowered from heaven, unquote, after the flood. So presumably the kingship was raised up into heaven during the flood. Yeah. Okay, interpretation of long reigns. The amazingly long tenure of the early kings has provoked many attempts at interpretation. At one extreme is the complete dismissal of the astronomically large figures as completely artificial, and the view that they are unworthy of serious consideration. At the other extreme is the belief that the numbers have a basis in reality and that the early kings were indeed gods who were capable of living much longer than humans. Here at Snake Bros, we fall much farther to the second one than the first one.
I mean, 3,600, or was this 36,000 years is one of them, but 3,600 is 2 processional ages. Or no, I'm sorry, it's an age and a half.
Yeah. In between the two extremes is the hypothesis that the figures represent relative power, triumph, or importance. I don't think that's in between, but we'll go with it. For example, in ancient Egypt, the phrase, quote, "he died at age 110," unquote, referred to someone who lived life to the full and who offered an important contribution to society. In other words, they didn't actually live to 100. It was a saying.
Yeah.
He lived to 110 years old. Meant like that guy did everything he wanted to do and died happy.
Right.
In the same way, the extremely long periods of the reign, but it seems dumb to put that kind of colloquialism in your freaking Kings List history, right? In the same way, the extremely long periods of reign of the early kings may represent how incredibly important they were and incredibly important they were perceived as being in the eyes of the people. This doesn't explain, however, why the periods of tenure later switched to realistic time periods.
I'm done.
What?
It's not an age and a half, 3,600. I'm trying to figure out. It's just,
It's there though.
yeah, it's processional,
Yeah,
360.
360.
But yeah, it's not an age and a half.
Related to this perspective is the belief that although the early kings are historically unattested, this does not preclude their possible correspondence with historical rulers who were later mythicized. Finally, some scholars have sought to explain the figures through a mathematical investigation and interpretation. Relation to Genesis.
Brett points out here that the 28,800 plus the 36,000 equals 64,800. So the first two equal the third.
Yeah, I think that's what they were saying in the article too. Maybe I didn't read it clearly. Yeah, they said,
I don't know. I was still vocalizing math over here, so I didn't.
Yeah,
know
it
what
says,
they were saying.
Hey, don't you be messing with me numbers! It says, Alulun became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Aljar ruled for 3,600 years. These two kings, they ruled for 64,800 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, 36,000.
yeah. Relation to Genesis. Some scholars, e.g. Wood, 2003, have drawn attention to the fact that there are remarkable similarities between the Sumerian Kings list and accounts in Genesis. For example, Genesis tells the story of, quote, the Great Flood, unquote, and Noah's efforts to save all the species of animals on Earth from destruction. Likewise, in the Sumerian Kings list, there is discussion of a great deluge, quote, the flood swept over the earth, unquote. The Sumerian king list provides a list of 8 kings, some versions have 10, who reigned for long periods of time before the flood, ranging from 18,600 years to 43,200 years. 432000.
Yeah.
This is similar to Genesis 5, where the generations from creation to the flood are recorded. Interestingly, between Adam and Noah, there are 8 generations in the Bible, just as there are 8 kings between the beginning of kingship and the flood of the Sumerian kings list. So in the Bible, they call them the 8 patriarchs. Right? So you have the 8 patriarchs biblically. There's the 8 kings, the Sumerian kings list. Egypt has, in the pyramid texts, lists 8 kings pre-flood that lived for incredibly long periods of time. It's the same deal. They script over that too. Even though they use that same list to like say that this is when Khufu was around and he built the pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just as soon as it goes before the flood, they're like, oh, that's all mythical, you know. You can't be believing that kind of thing, my boy. After the flood, the kings list records kings who ruled for much shorter periods of time. Thus, the Sumerian kings list not only documents a great flood early in man's history, but also reflects the same pattern of decreasing longevity as found in the Bible. Men had extremely long lifespans before the flood and much shorter lifespans following the flood. The Sumerian kings list is truly a perplexing mystery. Why would Sumerians combine mythical rulers with actual historical rulers in a single document? Why are there so many similarities with Genesis? Why were ancient kings described as ruling for thousands of years? These are just some of the questions that still remain unanswered after more than a century of research. And they remain unanswered because people don't want the answers. So that's the end of the article. There's pages and pages of fantastic comments that we can't really go into at the bottom of that. So if you guys are interested, you should go read the article and then just go through the comments. They are in a lot of like April writes good articles, but the comments just really dig into it and they're really awesome. And there's some great ideas in there. So we're gonna take a break. We'll come back and we'll discuss what we think about it and give you our comments. And we will see you after this short break with our pyramid scheme.
Are you tired of checking your feed every Wednesday and seeing a new Snake Bros episode? Does your head hurt from 30% brain expansion? And are you tired of having your mind exploded? If you suffer from any of these conditions, don't go to your doctor. Instead, send your money to the Snake Bros Pyramid Scheme. Donate any amount to Brothers of the Serpent Podcast and send those Snake Bros straight to pyramids.
I sent Snake Bros $2 and they went and explored an ancient volcano.
Snake Bros Pyramid Scheme. Scientifically proven to increase the probability of Snake Bros getting lost and dying.
I gave Snake Bros $5 on PayPal and they done took off digging in a cave.
Snake Bros Pyramid Scheme on PayPal now. Click on the PayPal link at brothersoftheserpent.com. Donate now and send those Snake Bros straight to pyramids.
Truth, I say. These Snake Bros mind explosions are all of more than gigantic size. We are back. Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. First segment of the second hour. And we are flipping over the sands of time. Now, speaking of sands of time, retro causality, weird time traveling shit, what do you think about this King's List stuff? Can people, I mean, like, I know the numbers are processional, but do you think that means that the kings actually didn't live that long, that they're trying to tell us something else? I mean, a lot of people think they mean epochs or dynasties, you know?
I don't know, man.
I know you don't know. I'm asking for speculation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm speculating. I would speculate that if the Anunnaki are real or were real, it makes sense to me that a being from another planet that had a totally different year, like totally different cycles of nature than ours, like that they would be quote unquote evolved or whatever. Their life cycles would match their,
or even a human with like fully activated space genes, maybe
Maybe
whatever
so.
you would call that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they had. Another thing that I thought of was like, I think I was reading this article actually. How did this happen? I probably tagged it for Snake Bros and couldn't find it in my list because I don't delete the ones that I've already used, and I need to do that.
Yeah.
As I start looking through my my bookmarks right at the end, and I'm like, we're already in the show, and I've forgotten to do it. And I'm just like, no, I don't have any news. So but no, okay. So I read something about the idea of actually like transmitting your mind or your brain. You know, these materialists are thinking that like they can transmit your whole mind and brain and everything over to another body.
Yeah.
Right.
Or into a computer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like that got me going on this idea that like, what if we could actually. Oh, I remember. It was not that. That was what got me thinking about it, but I think it had to do with the whole CME, you know, if we had these heightened senses of our true selves, our true spirits or minds, could we actually, would our bodies matter like they do today? Like, could we actually put our mind into another body?
Yeah. Possess something, basically.
Yeah, or like if you have a child, can you merge with their mind so well as you're raising them that they almost like are you?
Yeah.
You know, they're themselves too, but they also have all of you.
Or you can record your essence into a crystal skull, for example, and then they can get it back out or whatever. Like I remember there was. I know that sounds ridiculous, but
I was just thinking specifically in terms of, like, this thought made me think of the King's List.
Yeah.
Like, what if they? Okay, and that.
I see.
That basically is like the dynasty, right? You know, it's your lineage. But if it was really like you're the same guy and the bodies are just procreating, they're doing the material thing.
yeah, I got you.
So there's still a question of
So
like,
you're just
what,
inhabiting each new successive body, but you're the same person.
and there's still a question about like what is it when you have a kid, like what is that?
Yeah.
You know, like is that a whole brand new spirit, or is it actually another part of you, a part of your own spirit that's in there? And like, so if let's say it was a part of the spirit that was inhabiting your body.
If you were enlightened or ascended, and if they became also, then maybe there would be.
It's
some
like
kind of-
there's like your whole family is a single spiritual being.
yeah.
And so it doesn't matter. It's like your family is the king, and maybe that's where we got this strange idea of bloodlines
Yeah.
in kingship, you know. And it's like we're still trying to do this thing where like
Yeah, but they're totally not enlightened anymore.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
they all turn out to be like crazy nut
Yeah.
jobs and like different people, but
Right. That's really interesting. That's a great answer.
so that was one of the things I actually thought about before you even brought up this King's List, which is funny.
Because
I
retro
didn't know-
causality.
yeah. I didn't know you were going to bring up this King's List.
Well, I was saying about the comments, like, and I actually wrote one around 2014. And I didn't know at the time that I was going to be doing a podcast. So here we are. And I'm going to read this because this is what I was like, and this is actually in the material sense of longevity.
Yeah.
Okay. And Brett might be able to, the watcher might be able to jump in on this after I finish the comment. He can maybe go into it a little bit.
Stand down or die.
So and I haven't read this in a long time, so if it sounds dumb, I can't remember. Stipulating that such beings truly existed and as described in ancient texts, even if we assume they were purely biological rather than being technologically assisted biological or cybernetic, or just purely technological, or perhaps non-biological but also non-constructed, meaning life based on other elements and or forces than what we are used to. I don't think it can be said that such beings would, quote, defy the logic of time and organic degeneration, unquote. And I was responding there to something somebody else said, that anything living that long defies the logic of time.
Yeah, I definitely don't think
Right.
that.
There are plenty of examples within the community of organic life on Earth that display an ability to regenerate or repair, such that, barring drastic accidents, these life forms are functionally immortal. They aren't literally immortal because the odds of a drastic accident taking place keep rising the longer they live. Of course, most such examples of immortal life on Earth are at the very bottom of the, quote, evolutionary ladder, unquote, meaning mostly single-celled simpletons like bacteria, which don't even have the decency to contain their chromosomes within a nucleus like the higher eukaryotic cells do. But they also lack the long repeating chains of nucleotides at the ends of their chromosomes known as the telomeres, which act as a limiting agent in the number of times that eukaryotes can copy themselves. Ergo, these and anything made up of these types of cells, including us, are mortal. The simpler plasmid bacterium lacks the limiting telomeres, being evolutionarily incapable of even counting from 0 to 1, and as such is ageless, if not actually immortal in the purest definition of the word. Then I give a journal link and say, that link contains the following relevant quote. From the evolutionary viewpoint, therefore, the fundamental nature of cells is immortal, and mortality is an evolutionary phenomenon acquired by eukaryotes. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I think purely from a physics standpoint, functional biological immortality or agelessness is most certainly within the realm of possibility. From an evolutionary standpoint, it is less likely to be an optimal solution because, for one thing, mortality begets evolution through reproduction.
Stand down or die.
Bacteria don't really reproduce. Their system isn't complex enough or controlled enough to do that. Rather, they swap plasmids and mutate. But they can only mutate into another kind of bacteria with different parameters. They do not evolve, not really. They've been mutating all over the place since time began, and they still can't count to 1. Aside from that, the ancient texts and legends and myths of the gods never imply they were immortal in the sense that they could not be killed, nor does it imply that they were ageless like bacteria. They had a generational cycle. It was just way, way longer than that of humans. The immortality of the gods was not forever. It just meant thousands or tens of thousands of years rather than a few decades. A lot of the earliest texts also specify some kind of, quote, divine sustenance, unquote, that was consumed by the gods on a regular basis, something that was fundamental to their longevity. The tree of life, the water of life, the ambrosia of the gods, etc. This was the central driving factor of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which seemed to imply that if one had a god in one's ancestry, then one could possibly attain the immortality of the gods if one could lay hands on the divine food. This appears to imply some type of genetic-related anti-aging therapy, possibly, which was certainly within the bounds of the possible to us today. So that was my comment on just material,
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
longevity.
I mean, there's like I've seen stories about that too. Like, oh, scientists just possibly discovered the immortality,
Yeah.
blah blah, whatever.
Well, I remember that guy that stayed in space for a whole year and got his space genes activated, had longer telomeres when he came back down.
Yeah.
Space genes. Punch you in the space genes.
Gonna make your space genes float.
I'm gonna put divots in the rivets with my physical arm.
Stupid.
You got anything to say about that, the eukaryotic cells, Brett? What do you think?
No, he doesn't.
So, I've got thoughts on everything.
Of course, Watcher.
So, yeah, when it comes to bacterial growth rates, colonies, things like that, they're functionally and for all intents and purposes immortal, but there's actually several, quote unquote, basic higher forms of life. For example, lobsters. I don't know if you guys have heard about this ever at any point, but lobsters as adults actually express telomerase, which is moves along and it actually repairs the telomeres. And it's interesting that you brought up space genes literally as I was reading this to sort of brush back up on it. In utero, right? Like as an embryo, humans have telomerase.
Whoa.
It's everywhere because it's basically, writing these long chains of DNA. Well, what happens in
telomerase? Wait. Telomerase is an enzyme. What is it?
Yeah, it's an enzyme.
Okay.
So in utero, you're essentially floating in zero gravity.
Yeah.
Right?
I see where you're going with this, I think.
Yeah. And so in space, you're floating in zero gravity. You're sort of like in a giant space womb. So you could say that perhaps, I don't know, maybe the absence of perceived gravitational force, I don't know, maybe that does something. Maybe that's what the whole space genes thing is about.
So could that, okay, all right. That's fantastic. So could that also, because on Earth, we simulate zero G by putting people in water. Do you think that maybe living underwater for long periods of time could also have the same effect? Actually, if you're actually floating in water, not living in an installation where that's full of air, but actually, like say, wearing a suit and actually living underwater for long periods of time somehow.
Yeah, I mean potentially. If that's the catalyst, the change of gravity on the human body.
Because remember that a lot of the ancient legends talk about these gods coming out of the oceans. Viracocha, Oannes for the Greeks came out of the water and taught them and then went back to it every night.
Yeah, I'm something to be said for that. And then there's also the study that was done. You and I talked about this, about when the atmosphere was much denser and the increased energy available via solar radiation causing megafauna.
Yeah, and just the fact that the studies have shown that putting various animals under higher pressure increases their size because there's support.
Right. So I mean, really, what can you say about that? That if you change the environment, like the barometric pressure, the gravitational force, the magnetic field, you change these things and there's a huge change in lifespan, size, the way that something would move around, like walking upright versus on all fours. I mean, there's all kinds of variables that change completely. So it's really difficult for anyone to say that it is impossible for humans to have longer lived life cycles. Well, impossible in this specific set of environmental parameters, maybe. But who says that these are the only environmental parameters that we've ever existed in?
Okay, yeah. So go ahead.
Brenner sent us a video. We've been having, like we said, this ongoing conversation. He sent a video of a guy. It was a TED Talks. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was doing an experiment He was actually a music professor, and he started messing around with, resonance, and he was talking about how, this person can sing and break the wine glass, and you can break things if you find their resonant frequency, and then you crank up a tone generator loud enough at that frequency, you can shatter it. And so they ended up finding this patent on basically a plasma antenna that allowed them to make these pulses of electromagnetic fields at whatever frequency they chose. And so they started looking at cancer cells and trying to find their frequency, their resonant frequency. And so they're pulsing this electromagnetic field at the cancer cells, in a slide, and they're watching them once they find the right frequency, which was 100,000 hertz or somewhere up there. The cancer cell would just start breaking apart, just completely disintegrating. And so they're looking at this as like this
A new kind of cancer therapy.
Yeah, and all the other cells that are totally different sizes, have totally different resonant frequencies, would not shatter. They're just like swimming around doing their own thing or whatever, and the cancer cells over there and just like just coming apart,
turning into food.
So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because going back to the Schumann resonance, if there was a time when the electromagnetic field resonant frequency was optimal for, say, the telomeres not shattering and falling apart. Like, in other words, they might be in a more conducive environment to grow longer. Maybe they would naturally grow longer under different resonant frequencies, but because there are certain frequencies always happening now in this particular, I call them solar regimes.
Yeah, solar regimes. Yeah, I completely agree.
So this one that we're in has limited man's lifespan to 120 years, as the ancient text said. After the flood, so we have this massive cataclysm, and if it was some type of solar cataclysm that really changed a lot of things going on in the sun, a lot of things going on Earth, and just totally limited our lifespan at that point, it's conceivable, in other words, that under different EM frequencies and amplitudes of frequency vibration, that we might actually have, longer lifespans, because they are not conducive to things like cancer and other types of cells, and more conducive to even smaller things like the telomeres or genetics not falling apart.
Definitely.
Whatever.
Especially when you consider that from a biochemistry standpoint, humanity, as well as all living things, are defined by the interactions of electrons forming chemical bonds. And what's affected, what else do electrons do? They are the active units, quote unquote, of magnetism, electricity. Mm-hmm. So if there's a different resonant frequency, if there's different radiations that we're exposed to, then our electrons are in different states, then everything changes. Yeah. From the base level of biochemistry. So you start there, and then you build up to a fully functioning being, and the possibilities are essentially endless.
Yeah, maybe the food of the gods, whatever it was that they were eating, was actually something that was designed, maybe it was some type of sort of electrical in nature, maybe some type of electrolyte or something that caused their bodies to have a higher frequency, raising their vibrations or whatever.
Could you eat something that would put telomerase in your body, Brett? Would that work?
I mean, in theory, yes. The issues that I would see with that, and I'm sure there are ways to work this out, would be, you'd have to have it buffered the right way so that it wasn't destroyed by your stomach acid, and then you'd have to have it in the right conformation so it could be absorbed in your intestines into a usable form. But I mean, if we're talking about the same beings that, we give credence to the possibility that they could have genetically engineered us from the ground up, they could totally do that shit.
But I mean, can't you, with some cancer treatments, like the chemotherapy, can't you just, don't they give them sometimes an oral thing? They just take it and it's got
this. Yeah, they use retroviruses. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I was thinking of like what they put in your body that's radioactive.
Yeah, I mean, it targets cancer cells, but it targets cancer cells in terms of like, you have liver cancer, so we're giving you this corrosive radioactive shit that's going to be metabolized by your liver.
Exactly.
So it's going to go
eating it.
to your liver.
Yeah.
So you can target things like that. Yeah.
So the
I mean,
the
there's all kinds
radiation
of
or
ways
the
to do it.
radioactivity is doing the same thing. It's resonating at some ridiculously high frequency, and it's just tearing shit apart.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Right.
like, it seems like there could be. Now I know that in a lot of ancient texts, I think that the eating of things is a
Yeah, it's a big deal.
is a euphemism or is a metaphor for
Oh, okay,
things,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's the Egyptian thing? Like the something about
Opening of the mouth.
Yeah, the opening of the mouth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
no
weird
one-
stuff
Yeah,
about
no one
eating
knows
stuff.
what the opening of the mouth ceremony was for, or even what it looked like, but they know that it existed because they talk about it.
So maybe it wasn't a quote unquote food necessarily that they ate, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting too because, so what I've been thinking of, like you guys are going into the details of how it might work. But what I've been thinking of is the correlations to legends. Think of like, let's say that the quote unquote gods were just humans from the previous solar regime who had escaped the planet before the destruction happened because they knew it was coming, right? Then they come to return and like they realize that it's so different now that like lifespans are drastically changed, and so they start trying to figure out, well, how can we, well, first now they're going to want to take supplements so that they don't die, right?
Exactly,
Because
yeah.
and they start living, they do things like live underwater, because that water blocks shitloads of radiation, and it also may help stimulate your space genes, right? Whatever. So they're coming out of water and everything, and then maybe the whole deal like Sitchin talked about with the gold was not their attempt to heal their, well, it was their attempt to heal their planet. It's just that their planet is the previous solar regime planet. They were wanting to make a golden shield around Earth, because that could also, maybe they were thinking of this like seeding the atmosphere with gold flecks in order to try to make it back like it was before, and then when they realized they couldn't do it, they left.
Yeah.
And here's another interesting
fast.
thought: the hyperquantum purple UV absorbing paint.
Yeah, the
So we know
superconducting
that
super quantum
UV,
super paint.
Yeah, UV. I believe it's UVA. I know there's UVA and UVB. Whichever one sunblock blocks.
Wait, you can block that thing?
Well, there's two types of UV radiation. One of them, the one that causes skin cancer, like no matter what you do, it's bad for you,
Yeah.
right? Well, that purple paint absorbs it.
Yeah.
So maybe things like that are also an effort to do something, you know, to try to make it possible to survive here.
And that explains why purple has always been considered since
color of royalty.
royalty,
Kings
because
and
the
gods.
kings wore armor painted in purple, superconducting super paint.
Yeah.
I wonder what plaid does. Plaid must do something seriously important.
Because of the
Makes you really good at chopping down trees.
Like the leprechauns and the guy with the little flute and stuff. It's like they're always wearing
yeah,
plaid.
and there's the legend of the very tall guy with the gigantic eyes wearing plaid shirts, like all
Yeah.
over history, and yeah,
It must do something.
plaid does something.
Makes you live forever.
Plaid. Sorry. Get your new Snake Bros plaid shirt.
Yeah.
Live longer.
Even better, purple plaid. You can be the most.
The purple plaid of the gods.
You can be the hippest hipster on the block.
That's right. Purple plaid pants, purple plaid jacket.
Come on, man. Nobody's doing it. And you might as well order your quantum superposition yoga mats. Comes with 2 mats and a book on quantum superpositions.
That's right. Yoga superpositions. Strike a pose and occupy both mats at the same time. We got lots of commercials to work on here.
Yeah.
Quantum yoga. Order now and get 2 yoga mats so that you can occupy them at the same time. All right. So the next topic I have, if I can pull it up here, if we're done with that, you guys done with that?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
for now.
Yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about it for the next 10,000 years.
Wearing your super quantum purple plaid. All right, so we went through Randall Carlson's whole thing on the Holy Grail, which was fantastic. Now he has this series of articles called "The Redemption of the Beast," and this is a big change of topic. This is about the carbon cycle, and it is fascinating and it's interesting because we have a job. Kyle and I work in where we try to grow things now. Or an orchard and a vineyard. And we have talked to many experts on growing things. And all of them seem like nonplussed or like sort of, they kind of dismiss our thing about CO2 and plants needing it. And that's really all that they need. So Randall Carlson has CO2 and water. CO2, water, and sunlight.
And a few tiny little bits.
Yeah, micronutrients. But okay, so I'm gonna read this. I'll start out with this article. Maybe it'll be a two show. I may not be able to finish all of the articles in this show, but because it's a 6-part series. But I'll skip some stuff. Anyways, he says I'll begin the review by introducing two graphs from relatively recent textbooks on environmental science that depict the carbon cycle throughout the various planetary sources and sinks. Okay, so the importance of this is that it shows you the amount of CO2 in the air, the amount of CO2 in the soil, and the amount of CO2 dissolved in water, and so on and so forth. So he goes, you will note the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is given as 750 gigatons. You will also note that 560 gigatons are consumed in the process of photosynthesis by land plants. Okay,
Wow.
so that's most of it.
Not much of a surplus there.
Right. Take special note of the amount in the ocean, 38,000 gigatons, or 50 times the amount in the atmosphere. The soil at any time stores about 1,500 gigatons. In the ocean, the CO2 is taken up by a variety of marine organisms, wow, that have the ability to precipitate calcium carbonate, or CaCO3, from seawater. This calcium carbonate forms the shells or exoskeletons of creatures such as scallops, bryozoans, foraminifera, and another one that I can't even pronounce.
Seashells.
Yeah, seashells. When these creatures expire, their shells drift down and consolidate on the ocean floor, where they are eventually lithified under pressure into limestone, chalk, and marble to become part of the lithosphere, or rocky crust of the Earth. This is the greatest of all the reservoirs of carbon dioxide storage. This chart does not show the estimated amount of CO2 stored in the lithosphere, but it is enormous. Before going to the next graph, note that the amount generated through both human and natural combustion is 6 gigatons. That's both human. Right. That's both human and natural combustion, meaning all volcanoes, all ocean vents, all that stuff. Okay. Tiny. The next graphic also depicts the generalized global carbon cycle. It is reproduced from. Okay, so he reads all that. Let's see, or I won't read all that. It contains additional interesting details. In this graphic, fossil fuel burning accounts for 5.5 gigatons introduced in the atmosphere. This is 1/2 gigaton less than the preceding chart. Presumably, the 1/2 gigaton difference being the result of natural combustion and volcanism, which are not included in this number. Okay. Storage in shallow ocean water is the same in both charts. Fossil fuel deposits are shown to contain about 4,000 gigatons of CO2, while the sedimentary rock reservoir contains upwards of 100 million gigatons.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a truly staggering amount of carbon dioxide, and all of it at one time passed through the global atmosphere before it was taken up by the oceans, converted into biogenic calcium carbonate, and locked into Earth's crust.
Those dang clams are stealing all our CO2.
This is a clear implication that the ocean acts as a powerful pump, constantly extracting CO2 from the atmosphere and ultimately sequestering it into carbonate sedimentary rocks, where it remains for a very, very long time. The natural process of ocean uptake is constantly depleting the Earth's atmosphere of carbon dioxide, and if not replenished, it would relatively quickly reduce the amount of CO2 to a concentration too low for effective photosynthesis. Okay, so that's the first article. So, like, if you think about this is the other thing that always bugs me about the whole CO2 cycle. Like, the data almost always shows historical temperature trends of the planet and like coinciding with CO2 in the atmosphere is that the temperature goes up first. And that makes sense. Think of a Coke. You got a carbonated drink. If it's cold,
It's retaining its
CO2, its carbonation. If you heat it up, it starts to bubble and all the CO2 comes out. The ocean is the same way. When it's cold, it can keep all the CO2. When it warms up, it starts to outgas CO2. So the temperature rises and then the CO2 goes out into the atmosphere. They have used
Correlation is not causation.
Right. They have used the inexactness of dating methods to say that it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Because there's always an error given. Usually
Yeah.
of several hundred years or whatever. They could say, well, the CO2 rose up and then the planet heated. Okay, so let me go to the next article here.
But hang on.
Wait. No, I'm sorry. What?
I was just working on this joke, like based on this thing that he said in the beginning. It was like, you want to tell somebody you're really gonna kick their ass. There's the thing where you're like, I'm gonna stomp a mud hole in you and walk it dry, like that one. Yeah. It's like I'm gonna stomp you down until the lithification of your bones, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Lithification. I love that.
That's right. Stomp you down into that mud till you get liquefied. All right. After 21 more years of studies, these authors, the late Sylvian Whitwer, who passed away in 2012 at the age of 95, reiterated the fact that there were benefits to the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide. Am I starting to get your article here? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. But then he went on to say something else very interesting. He, along with co-author Emeritus Professor of Biology Boyd R. Strain, pondered the effect of increasing the supply of CO2 on the planetary vegetation realm and speculated that, quote, an increase in plant growth due to fertilization of extra CO2 has not been measured, but a 5 to 10% increase may have already occurred. Current data indicate that plants growing at higher than normal CO2 levels are more tolerant of water, temperature, light, and atmospheric pollutant stresses. There are effects on carbon metabolism, plant growth and development, microbial activity, and terrestrial and aquatic plant communities. Here we see that by 1985, these scientists were speculating that there may have already occurred as much as a 5 to 10% increase in plant growth worldwide due to carbon dioxide fertilization. In other words, that the CO2 levels have been steadily climbing for a long time. But at that time, they did not have sufficient data available to confidently make such a claim. We will come back to this question directly and see that now, in 2017, which is when he wrote this, we do have enough data to draw some conclusions. Returning to the subject of carbon dioxide utilization in greenhouses, we turn to a 1973 report by the Economic Research Service with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In this report, titled Global Review of Greenhouse Food Production, the authors presented a brief exposition of early studies relating to the effects of controlled increases of carbon dioxide on plants. So here's a quote from their work. Carbon dioxide, along with water, is one of the two major ingredients in the process of photosynthesis. Below normal levels of CO2, often found in unventilated greenhouses, can reduce the rate of photosynthesis, while above normal levels can hasten photosynthetic activity. Okay. The expansion, let's see. Okay. The reason below normal levels of carbon dioxide occur in unventilated greenhouses is that the plants quickly consume all available CO2 as they grow, and unless the supply is replenished, it will diminish to levels insufficient for continued photosynthesis, thereby stunting further plant growth. The review goes on to discuss the upsurge in CO2 utilization in greenhouses in the 1960s due to the development of safe and economical combustion sources of CO2, along with monitoring devices and plastic tubing for distribution and circulation. These innovations led to a major increase of testing and experimentation. The review describes the situation in Europe at the time. The expansion first took place in Holland. It started in February 1961 when a grower used small paraffin or kerosene oil warming stoves during the daytime hours on lettuce and obtained exceptional quality and weight. The effect was traced to CO2. Follow-up work at the Glasshouse Experimental Station in Naldwick showed outstanding results on lettuce and strawberries and good results on tomatoes, endive, spinach, and radishes. The weight of the lettuce was increased and growth accelerated by 20 to 30%. During the 1962-63 season, the area of treated lettuce expanded into thousands of acres, and 25% of the early greenhouse tomato growers used CO2. By 1972, the total area treated in Holland was about 7,000 acres. Okay. So he says a 1983 study on 4 plant species conducted using transparent open-topped chambers placed in fields. And like they could be open-top because CO2 is generally heavier than... Yeah, it'll sit on the ground. So you don't have to have a ceiling if you don't want to. Carbon dioxide was fed into the chambers by means of a 3/4 horsepower fan and metered day and night. A high-pressure manifold allowed control of the ventilation airstream to generate 3 different CO2 concentrations. The tests were conducted by 3 botanists, and a report describing the tests and their results appeared in the Journal of Science. The essential role of plants in the carbon cycle makes them a logical starting point for assessing the impact of elevated CO2 on living systems. Through photosynthesis, plants form the support system for the rest of the biosphere. Since carbon is a cheap input in the food-producing process, and he underlines this part, any appreciable response of plants to changing CO2 concentrations could have far-reaching implications. The 4 species upon which the tests were conducted were corn, soybeans, loblolly pine, and sweet gum trees. The plants were grown in pots and exposed to the different levels of CO2 for a period of 3 months. All plant treatment protocols such as watering, fertilizing, light exposure were controlled and kept consistent. The carbon dioxide concentrations varied between 340 and 910 ppm, parts per million. The results of the test was that, quote, growth was enhanced in all 4 species. Yield increased for the 2 crop species and wood volume increased for the trees. And in addition, plants growing in atmospheres containing 520 to 910 parts per million CO2 did not undergo the wilting that we commonly observe for control plants on hot summer afternoons, when the rate of water uptake was exceeded by the rate of water loss. This is negative vapor pressure. Wilting on hot afternoons inhibits leaf expansion and photosynthesis at a time when other environmental factors are most favorable for rapid carbon fixation. Thus, a corn plant growing in an atmosphere with a high level of CO2 was able to continue fixing carbon and avoided wilting even though it had a greater leaf area.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, I'll stop there with the articles, but he basically explains that the reason this happens is because the plants all grow extra shells and layers of cells on their leaves.
Yeah.
And they reduce the amount of stomata, which is the mouths that the plants open in the leaves to breathe in CO2. So they drastically reduce stomata amounts because they don't have to have so many of them to get the CO2 they need. And it's the open stomata where they lose the water.
Right.
So they become massively resistant to pathogens and water loss and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to take one more break, and we will come back for the final segment and finish redempting the beast, CO2. And snakes.
Snakes! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dolmens and pyramids and moai and obelisks and snakes.
Obelamps!
Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. Final segment of the final hour. Episode 55. And we are talking about the beast. The beast. CO11.
They call him the beast.
It's a carbon cycle. You get on it and you pedal. And it's made of carbon.
I heard those are really lightweight carbon cycles. All right. This is the third article in the Randall Carlson's Redemption of the Beast. One more benefit, carbon dioxide and ozone. There is another benefit to carbon dioxide enrichment that needs to be discussed. It relates to the effects of ozone pollution on plants. Ozone, or O3, is a molecule composed of 3 oxygen atoms that normally makes up only about 0.6 parts per million of the atmosphere. The greatest concentrations of ozone are found in the stratosphere between 6 and 30 miles above the Earth's surface. Stratospheric concentrations of ozone range between 2 and 8 parts per million, about 10 to 50 times greater than at the bottom of the atmosphere. At this height above the Earth's surface, ozone provides the crucially important service of intercepting ultraviolet rays, which are very damaging to living things. However, at low atmospheric levels near the Earth's surface, ozone can become highly phytotoxic. I think I said that right. Ozone can interfere with photosynthesis, and a considerable amount of evidence demonstrates the reduced crop yields when exposed to ozone pollution. The website of the Missouri Botanical Garden discusses the damaging effects to plant life from too much ozone exposure. Quote, Ozone is the most damaging of air pollutants to plants. The action of sunlight or ultraviolet radiation on molecular oxygen and oxides of nitrogen spontaneously generate ozone, and ozone can move across great distances to cause damage to plants far from its origin and therefore is classified as a non-point source pollutant. The extent of damage depends on the concentration of ozone, the duration of exposure, and plant sensitivity. Acute damage to deciduous trees causes marginal leaf burn and dot-like irregular-shaped lesions or spots that may be tan, white, or dark brown. Symptoms may spread over entire leaves. Another common symptom is bleaching of the upper leaf surface. Acute damage to conifers causes browning at the same point on all needles in a bundle, or needle cluster. Due to the known damaging effect of ozone on plants and knowing that atmospheric levels of CO2 are rising and would probably continue to rise, and that many of the same industrial practices that added to the growing carbon pool also contributed ozone to the atmosphere, a number of scientists have looked at the interactive effects of carbon dioxide enrichment and high levels of ozone. In one important statistically rigorous study, the researchers sought to determine the interactive effect on plants in an environment both elevated carbon dioxide and ozone. To better understand this situation, the authors selected 6 perennial species, including 2 types of trees, quaking aspens and red oaks, 2 species of grass, western wheatgrass and prairie June grass, and 2 species from the C4 group, or Sidodes grama and little blue stem. The number in subscript refers to the type photosynthetic pathway. C3 plants were discussed above. C4 plants have a different method of extracting carbon from the carbon dioxide molecule than C3 plants and are adapted to generally more arid environments. The idea in this study was to get a relatively diverse cross-section of plants, and to perform the experiment conducted at the University of Wisconsin, 64 seedlings of each species were planted in 2 controlled environment growth rooms. Each room was divided into 4 individual chambers for the purpose of testing the different treatment regimes. The authors describe the situation. In industrial regions, current ambient levels of O3, or ozone, reduce photosynthesis in many and probably most plant species. Chronic O3 pollution commonly results in increased respiration rates, shifts in C allocation, decreased leaf retention, and shortened leaf longevity, and current levels are known to be high enough to reduce the growth and yield of agricultural crops and trees. After discussing their material and methods, they report on the results of their experiments, and the results proved quite remarkable. The first thing they noted was that, quote, in all 6 species used in this experiment, plants grown at ambient CO2 were smaller and had a lower RGR, or relative growth rate, when exposed to an elevated level of O3-induced reductions in situ photosynthesis in ambient CO2. In other words, under a concentration of CO2 equal to present atmospheric concentrations, the presence of ozone caused stunted growth in the test plants. However, and this is where it gets interesting, examination of the interactive effects of CO2 and O3 revealed that elevated CO2 reduced the deleterious effects of high O3 in both photosynthetic and growth. Okay, so in other words, like ozone pollution that hurts plants is drastically reduced when there's more CO2. So these places, these factories that produce a lot of ozone, they also produce lots of CO2, which to use, you know, like environmentalists jargon, it offsets their CO2 footprint, or it offsets their ozone footprint by creating CO2. But they're always wanting people to drastically reduce their CO2 footprint. You're like, well, wait. Yeah. Wait, you hate plants? Why do you hate plants? So that's Article 3. Let's see, go to 4. I thought that one had the greening. Maybe this one is the one.
I cannot do that.
Okay, Part 4. Tropical response to CO2. A study appeared in Trends in Ecology and Evolution in the year 2000 that looked at the response of tropical forests to increasing amounts of atmospheric carbon dioxide. The authors were with the Institute of Ecology and Resource Management, University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Their report, appearing in the perspectives section of the journal, began by discussing what they presumed to be the inexorable future rise of atmospheric CO2 concentrations due to fossil fuel burning and land clearing, and the implications of this increase to global climate change. They then qualify their statements by saying, quote, however, these changes are meshed within an immense natural global carbon cycle that is still poorly understood and that will almost certainly provide new surprises. Well, they never say that part on the... The 2 things these authors emphasize should be kept in mind before continuing. The immensity of the natural carbon cycle relative to the contributions of humans, and the fact that this immense natural phenomenon, which in the author's words is still poorly understood, is central to the question of climatic consequences. If the authors are right that the immense natural carbon cycle is still poorly understood, how is it possible to be so absolutely certain of outcomes that we can declare the debate over and the science settled with respect to the matter of climate change? A recent review of experimental studies growing trees in open-top chambers indicates that a 300 ppm increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration stimulates photosynthesis by 60%. That's just 300 ppm increase. Like, in other words, we go from whatever, the 400 we have now to 700.
Yeah.
That's not even doubling it, so... Okay, so 60%. The growth of young trees by 73% and wood growth per unit leaf area by 27%. It seems probable that there will be a similar response in natural forest ecosystems. In the context of the notable findings of John Lloyd, or the authors of the study, they proceeded to discuss the implications for the tropics. Quote, because of their intrinsic high productivity, tropical forests are a prime candidate for such a sea fertilization response, carbon fertilization. And the crucial question has been to what extent such a response might be limited by nutrient availability, right? That's what we have to deal with. In particular, by low nitrogen or low phosphorus. However, studies referenced by Lloyd have shown that plants might increase their nutrient acquisition process by investing in mycorrhizal colonization and by mineralizing nutrient reserves in the soil by the production of surface enzyme systems and organic acid exudates.
Badass. So because they're getting more CO2 and
they're able to use more of their own resources to burn stuff out of the soil.
Yeah.
In other words, it is entirely possible, if not likely, that plants in a carbon dioxide-enriched environment would develop the means to more effectively utilize available nutrient supplies. Mycorrhiza are actually two different entities, a plant and a fungus, existing in a symbiotic or mutually beneficial relationship. Various kinds of fungus associate themselves with a particular plant through the root system. It has been found that the mycelium of the fungus can perform a number of functions beneficial to the plant. For example, accessing sources of phosphorus unavailable to the plant alone. It has been found that plants in association with mycorrhizal fungus are more resistant to diseases and effects of drought. These fungi are important in the colonization of barren or desolate landscapes that have been devastated by catastrophic floods, fires, or volcanic eruptions, and provide greater protection for plants growing in soils with high metal or acid concentrations. They call attention to one of the important variables in the response of plants to rising CO2. If plants become more efficient in the process of nutrient uptake, it mitigates one of the limiting factors of plants' response to increased carbon dioxide concentrations. In many of the hundreds of studies conducted on plants' response to increased carbon dioxide, nutrient availability, along with availability of light, was most frequently the limiting factor in the plant's exploitation of carbon dioxide conferred advantages. If this turns out to be true, the plants gain improved means of accessing nutrients in the soil, thereby increasing their bulk mass available for carbon uptake. Then, as they point out, a small and steady increase in forest productivity can produce a large net carbon sink. In other words, the increase in biomass increases the ability of the forest to consume more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and transforming it into greater plant mass. The increased growth and plant mass, the forest in turn consumes more carbon dioxide in a positive feedback loop, removing it from the atmosphere in the process. So
that's really cool. Like it's like a balancing act. Really.
Right. The plants are the more CO2 you have in the atmosphere, the bigger and better the plants get at breathing it out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because they use it to get bigger and better.
Right. That's badass.
So,
like there's all these things that we do these soil samples, and we'll send them off, and they come back with all of this stuff from the chemists.
Yeah.
And the chemists will recommend, adding
all these micronutrients.
Yeah, adding this or that to your soil, because ultimately, whatever you're adding will help break down some compounds into these various micronutrients that the plant needs.
Yeah.
But they never point out one of the main chemical reactions going on, which actually results in more of the biomass in the soil biodegrading
and creating CO2.
Because it'll reach certain levels of acidity or whatever its acidity level is.
Yeah.
And it'll kind of neutralize, and the biomass will stop breaking down.
Right.
So when you have biodegradation, you have released CO2.
Right.
So it's that's why we use composts. You're putting all of this plant matter and you're adding water and it's getting hot and it's going through all these chemical reactions.
Right, and it isn't because the plant needs to eat that compost. It's because the compost decomposes and generates CO2 in a cloud around the plant.
Right. Now, there's also the argument that it's because it's decomposing and it has like the whatever the chemical situation is, it's easier for the plant to get, the potassium or whatever.
Right.
Actually, I don't think that the plants even use that. The potassium does something else in the soil that allows it to.
But this also explains why talking to your plants makes them grow better.
Oh yeah.
Because exhaling, if you're fauna as opposed to flora, when you exhale, you're exhaling CO2. So if you're sitting there like, oh yeah, plant, you're gonna be beautiful, you're breathing all over it, and it's just
in
like,
the sunlight.
Right.
Make sure you're talking to your plants in the daytime.
That's right. Or under a grow light or something. Yeah. As long as they have UV, they can take that CO2. They take six molecules of CO2 and sunlight and water, and they turn it into one glucose.
And that UV is just a resonant frequency that is just right. Like there's the chlorophyll molecule or whatever it is inside the plant is like, the way I look at it is like it starts resonating due to that light, and it's able in that resonant frequency to easily break apart the oxygen from the carbon.
Right.
Like, which is not that easy to do, but if you have the right frequency, you can shatter it.
Right.
So like the chlorophyll molecule has a geometric design, it's got this specific geometry that frequency of light hitting it vibrates it or excites it energetically, adding vibration to it. And so when it comes into contact with the CO2 molecule, it's the right frequency to just break that oxygen right off of it and get rid of that and take the carbon.
Yeah.
Like, that's the way I look at that kind of stuff. I think that's cool, man.
Yeah. What was the whole thing about, chemistry is just applied physics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got the,
everything is waves, people.
Yeah.
Come on. It's all vibration.
Yep. So, now correlating this to ancient shit. Corpulents. I mean, no.
Wait, what?
What? Yeah.
Stone turds.
That's right.
Your lithification of...
I love looking for ancient shit. I found some one time. I showed it to a paleontologist. He was like, yep, that's a corpulite. That's ancient shit right there.
Lithification and defecation.
But... Lithification of the defecation. All right. So, if previous to the end of the Ice Age, or whatever, before the cataclysm that changed everything, if we had a massively increased CO2 amount, then we would have had, and we were talking about this, the Watcher and I were talking about this in the break, we would have had megaflora.
Yeah.
Okay? And that explains megafauna. Like, you can't really have megafauna without megaflora. Like, you need, because these, like a single mammoth needed, multiple tons of biomass to sustain itself every day.
Yeah.
And we go back to the dinosaurs, the apatosaur or the alamosaur or whatever, these humongous, just titanic, leaf eating or herbivores, they needed a lot more than mammoths do. You need megaflora to support megafauna, right? And I think those two things correlate because I believe that it a massively increased amount of CO2 in the atmosphere probably implies that we had a lot more atmosphere without some kind of artificial induction into it, right? So if we have a much heavier, thicker atmosphere or whatever, and the pressure is higher, then that explains why things could grow so much larger. Mammals, anyway.
Yeah.
Because they've done those experiments where you put something under a pressure of 2 atmospheres, twice the amount of pressure we have at sea level, it'll grow bigger. There's just more oxygen,
It's got more of a structure around it.
And it's easier to get the oxygen out of the atmosphere, and that's the energy that it needs or whatever. So it has more of a support structure around it, and it has easier access to oxygen, which provides the energy for everything in any kind of animal.
Yeah.
So you have higher pressure, you have higher amount of CO2, you have enormous plants, and that's why you have enormous animals. And then something happens and destroys it, changes everything, changes the magnetic field, changes the atmosphere. We lose, like maybe we lost a bunch of it, like Mars has lost most of it.
It's like, okay, we have this little perfect little picture of this ancient world that no longer exists, that had all these huge freaking things everywhere.
Yeah.
And yet the idea that something huge in terms of time is just utterly ridiculous. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you live long
yeah.
lives.
Yeah. Oh, it could be enormous in size, but not in time.
Right. That's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
like we have that picture recorded,
Yeah.
you know, in the rock.
Right.
We see all these massive animals and
Yeah. They probably
all
lived for
these
thousands
massive-
of years.
Who knows? I mean, I'm just saying, it's like the fact that that can happen, but it's just totally ridiculous to imagine there was some situation here where things could live long.
Right.
I don't,
And people could be huge. Like, if we had megafauna, we would have had mega hominids. Like, why wouldn't we have enormous people?
where are the giant gorillas, man? Because we came from apes.
Gigantopithecus is 10 feet tall. He did, though. He did.
All of more than gigantic size.
They're in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
But I think that's fascinating that, like, all this stuff correlates to this picture of the ancient world that's provided to us by the myths of the ancients, not the standard model of today. Standard model of today is like, man, it's all bullshit. Like, all those stories about giants or, you know, people living alongside of enormous animals
Yeah.
and saran-wrapped dinosaurs.
I mean, that all goes back to uniformitarianism. It's like they can't imagine,
Down or die.
you know, that we could have lived in a world that was that different because it's
Right.
too long ago.
It doesn't fit evolution.
Yeah.
Like, we don't, yeah. Yeah. And I think that, like, uniformitarianism doesn't like the idea of very, like, they always point to adaptation as the evidence for evolution, but I'm like, adaptation happens very fast. It takes place very quickly. Or it doesn't happen at all. If you don't adapt, you die. Right?
Yeah.
So it happens quickly by nature. And so, like, the adaptation of humans from the previous world to the new one was very quick, probably. The people who didn't adapt died.
Yeah.
Or because they didn't, like, later on go study the part that they should have studied so that they wouldn't die when they were doing it at the time. Like, right?
Yeah.
You got to study your adaptation after you've done it. You got to figure out how to adapt later on
Right. So, like,
so that you'll retrocausally adapt.
I'm thinking about, like, the flood, right? In terms of adaptation, it's like you have to have one raindrop every couple of days in order for us to adapt to a worldwide flood. It's like,
cannot do
you know,
that.
in 10 million years, we're all walking around in puddles.
Right. Yes, there was a worldwide flood
Yeah, 50
over tens of millions
yeah.
of years.
50 million years later, we're up to our necks in it.
We're adapting. I think.
Yeah. So their necks grew a little bit longer over the next 10 million years.
Giraffes.
Giraffes, that's right.
Giraffes survived the flood because necks.
That's why our breathing areas are at the top of our bodies.
That's right.
Because there was water everywhere.
We used to breathe through our feet.
For the first 4 or 5 feet. So we became 6 feet tall, and our breathing apparatus was at the top.
That's right. That's right. And we developed these little hoods, our noses, so that whenever a wave came, you could keep your air and it wouldn't splash into your head.
Right. Those waves came really slow.
That's right. It took them thousands of years to develop. And then we learned how to swim. Or somebody got fat and floated. Whatever. Yeah. I don't know.
Down or die.
Adaptation. Get fat, float.
That's why we're all obsessed with salt.
It makes you float in the water.
Because, yeah, when you add it to the water.
Dang it, all this fresh water, I'm sinking. Yeah. I remember diving for. You remember diving for lobster in the Caymans?
Yeah.
In the bay, which was like incredibly salty.
Yeah.
And like you couldn't do it. You try to dive under the water, just like. It was so hard to stay down under the water.
Yeah, and it was really cloudy, and I remember getting down into some trench.
Yeah, and then you see the lobsters all on the side.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, there's lobster, and then some big shadows like by you, and you're like, oh my god,
Oh my god!
I'm getting out of there. I don't think I want to dive here anymore.
That's right. Now you know why all the lobsters are hiding in those holes. Oh man. So I want to like pull back to a theme that we were talking about a couple of shows ago about the
Stand down or die.
like the sort of concealment of this whole thing. Like why are there specific things that get hidden, like the long-head skeletons or the giants? You know, they don't hide like the ancient cave paintings unless they find one in a place where it doesn't fit the story, like Malta.
Cannot do that.
Right, where they erased the bull, the bison bull, off the wall in the Hypogeum. So, like, when you look through this stuff, you see, like, okay, so they're telling us things, but there's very specific things that get concealed or get hidden, like the ring watch that they found in that unbroken tomb in China. You know, like, they told us about that. Why? Why did they tell us about that? It's an out-of-place artifact, and it's impossible to explain.
I have no idea. I mean, there's like different groups of people doing different things, so it's kind of hard to say like why one piece of information gets out. I mean, not necessarily that it was on purpose.
Yeah.
You know,
like in China, one of the things that they definitely hid, or not hid, but there was a sort of a multinational effort at digging up these areas where they started finding these mummies that were obviously very ancient in China, and they were having red hair, blonde hair, braids. And then one guy famously asked, like, can I get the fingerprints off of them? And the Chinese guy was like, can you tell their genetic ancestry by their fingerprints? And the guy was like, yes. And he was like, no, you can't take their fingerprints. Right? He doesn't, because China's story, its own internal story about their land is that they've always been there, right?
Excuse me.
That those people, that they, you know, it's part of the totalitarianism of it, is like they have this history that they have told all their people. And they can't allow that story to be upended by there being white people there thousands of years before they were supposed to be there.
yeah.
So they can't allow this British scientist to get the fingerprints off of these red-haired mummies because that would destroy their story.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. You know,
yeah, it makes sense, but
that goes back to the indigenous argument.
yes, exactly.
But all that stuff does. That's really, in my opinion, we've talked about this before, that seems to me to be the best answer. You know,
Yeah, that's there's something political involved.
yeah, it's
and power.
modern. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason for hiding all of this has to do with modern power structures.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like, okay, so when they discover tombs that have not been looted, but then they don't find a body, and they say that it was looted, what's happening there? Because the people who are normally running the power structure did not do that. They, you know, they're breaking into the tomb for the first time, and they're telling people like, well, you know, they're all this treasure, but there's no corpse.
Yeah, maybe they didn't do it. I don't know.
Yeah, so you're saying that like maybe they hid it or whatever?
If it was a giant or a long head, like,
Yeah.
what are they going to do with it?
Send it to the Smithsonian.
Yeah, publish it? No.
But people have published those stories. It's just interesting to me that like sometimes it looks like somebody else was hiding the body.
Yeah. I mean, like, all those stories, like, that Jim Vieira is collecting from all the, you know, these major newspapers doing stories about giant skeletons being excavated and all that kind of stuff. Like, there was a time when there was no control over that, and then, you know, you start seeing this big fight science and religion and
Yeah.
you know what's the right story, and then we have evolution and all that, and like all the quote unquote scientists latch onto that idea, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the way it happened,
Right.
to discredit, you know, all of these, you know, mainly I guess the Christian creation idea.
Right, which you can also view as the older power structure too. Like it was an upending of an older power structure.
Right.
It's like,
So they built this whole thing, and then these other things that get in the way, especially things that point to the idea that these myths in these ancient quote unquote religious texts are correct.
Yeah.
They've got to you know, get rid of that.
Yeah. But it's weird too, because at the same time, they're standing on the shoulders of men like Newton, Copernicus.
Giants.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, I always point this out, like, previous to about 200 years ago, everyone was religious in some way or another.
Yeah.
So all of human development, from wherever you think it began to 200 years ago, we can, like, lay at the feet of people who believed in a god of some kind, religious people. So to turn around now and be like, "Whoa, that's stupid," blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, I'll tell you what, why don't you start at the beginning and then get all the way to where we are now and then tell me that. Like, in other words, like, you're standing here having, like, less than 200 years of development from people who are not religious, and all of their development is based on the work of all these other people who were.
Yeah.
You know, like this technological world that we have now did not, like, spring out of nothing starting from 200 years ago.
Right.
It stands on the shoulders of the giants, and the giants were religious people.
yeah.
Thousands of years of them, right? So, yeah, I'm like, that was sort of an aside, but the point I guess I'm getting at here is that, like, I do feel like there is a deeper attempt at hiding history that is just helped along by the power structure deal and this sort of like it's I think the fight between religion and science is largely a kabuki theater. There are some people who really do think that way, but they're not usually scientists. You know, it's like what the deal with, you get a scientist drunk or whatever, and he'll tell you all the anomalies that he's seen, and they're crazy, right? And like,
Yeah.
and a lot of paleontologists, you know, like are not very strong believers in evolution, even though they will say that they are when they're publishing their papers. They follow the model.
Yeah. But like this carbon cycle deal, I mean, like back in the 70s, they're doing all these tests, and now you don't ever
nowhere
hear
to be
anything
found.
about that. But
Right.
all the major greenhouses in the world that are producing stuff are using massive CO2 tanks, and they're
Right.
gassing their shit.
Right. Yep.
But it's like, don't publish anything about that.
Right.
You know, don't show the results of any studies
Yes.
with CO2. Like,
None of the journals will publish it if you try to write a paper on it.
yeah, that's totally points to the political situation with all that, you know.
Right.
I mean,
And that's about power. Like, there's an attempt with the whole climate thing to, like, get everybody to hand over all of their power, like literal power, like actual energy.
yeah. Like,
To hand over all the, yeah.
let us regulate
Yes.
every possible way you can get energy,
Take-
Right.
unless it's clean.
Which we define.
Yeah.
And those are usually industries that we run or own.
Yeah.
So, on that note, that's the end of the show. Stop giving powerful people your power. I think is the moral of that segment. All right, folks, that was the end of 55. Hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank all the same people I usually thank, except that I want to add Brenner, because he gave us this fantastic Sands of Time thing.
Yeah.
And a monitor. Thank you, Brenner, for contributing to the pyramid scheme by giving us toys for the Tangent Cube. Well, he gave us this 30-minute timer thing so that I actually know when the segments are ending now. It's awesome. And a big monitor so that we no longer have to switch back and forth between the stuff that Brett is saying and the actual audio being recorded. But also thanks to Kyle for all the producing. It's, as always, badass and it keeps getting better. Thanks to Kyle and Ty for all the music. I probably made some of that music. point. Or maybe I was like sitting next to Kyle when he was and I was like, yeah, bro, that sounds badass. Thanks to Brett England, the Watcher, for keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of the truth. Thanks to Laura for all the intros. They are awesome. I think that's about it. Right?
Yeah.
I think everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks to Mr. Todd Mulville for donating to the Pyramid Scheme, giving us pie.
Yeah, buddy. A little slice of pie. PayPal took a little slice of your pie.
PayPal took a bite out of the pie. Yeah. And that's it. Good night, Adamu. Get some CO2. That's maggots.